Jetzt wird der. Hey, welcome to a new episode of SDV Coffee Talk with 4 amazing guests and a very interesting topic. We will talk about SDVs and free and open source, actually. Just a little disclaimer from my side. Everything what I say is my own opinion and has nothing to do with my employer. So let's start, I would say, with the intro round. Vinicius, do you want to start?
Yes, pleasure to be here again. Fatih, thanks for having me here with this team. I think we are going to have a good conversation. So I work for around 20 years with embedded systems, being the last 10 on automotive, recently working with cool SDV projects, and also using open source for a long time, not contributing that much as I should. And I'm happy to be here. So just to make it clear, it's also my personal view that what I'm going to expose here, my own personal perspective.
Christian?
Yeah. Hello, I'm Christian. Also, thank you for having me, Fadi. It's a pleasure to see you all you guys here, and also it's like a little bit like a family reunion because we know each other from Bosch times, also Matthias from Bosch times. And you said you were not involved in the open source project, but you were also, let's say, participate a little bit in IceRix, our project which we drive at Excite, which is also under the Eclipse Foundation hosted. And I'm the co-founder of Excite and also co-CEO, founded it 1.5 years ago together with Matthias to drive an open source project, which also, let's say, shall become a safety critical component in mission critical systems. It's more like the first of its kind in this setup, and let's see where the journey goes.
Thanks. Matthias?
Yeah, hi, I'm Matthias. Also, thanks very much for the invitation, Fatih. It's great to be here. Christian already told a little bit, so I'm also a co-founder and co-CEO of Excite. We are trying to promote Eclipse IceRix in the open source. We are working on this project since about 10 years and really excited about it. Before I worked with Christian on this project, I was in the measurement and automation industry for about 10 years, working on FPGAs and embedded. And while this is also my personal opinion, I have the luxury as co-CEO that I can also act according to it. So yeah, that's about me.
Cool, thanks. Philip?
Yeah, thanks. So, well, I also have a long automotive history. Like Vinicius, I'm I think like roughly 20 years, not exactly, a little less. Hold many positions, participate in the first actually Linux-based infotainment systems in 2011, which we brought into the field. Sold about 30 million devices, I guess, overall based on Linux. And spent a little bit of time in open source at this point already, went into Linaro parts, then had a long way without open source. And since 2019, I'm back, more or less in the open with the ELISA project. I'm currently the technical steering committee chair of the Linux Foundation ELISA project, traveling between the both worlds of Eclipse SDV with the S core recently started and the Linux Foundation projects all around the safety critical space of open source. And yeah, I'm doing this here in this evening also with my personal view. So I'm not there on behalf of ETAS. It's all my considerations and my thoughts which I present here. And I'm happy that I can be here as a strong open source enthusiast. So, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. I mean, yeah, let's start. I mean, open source, I read a lot of LinkedIn posts actually in the last couple of months, especially after this Halo OS was open sourced and Score came into picture. That everybody is talking about open source in SDV context, and what is meant by open source in general? What do you think? What should we understand under free and open source software? I think there are a lot of misunderstandings.
My opinion here is that you can, let's see, divide open source project more like in two categories. You have one, these like it's a corporate open source stuff. Like here, for instance, when Google open source Android and so on, you have one company which has a business case behind it and wants to force this, and then open source is a means of doing this. For instance, also S-Core is for me like company a business case around it to be created, and then they want to utilize open source and, let's say, making this easier happen. And then you have the other world. It's like, hey, I want to get to know C, C++, Rust better, so therefore I create this cool terminal emulator, and it's so awesome. I want to share it with the world, and we have just fun doing stuff. And a lot of open source projects from the other side are, let's say, created like this, that someone wanted to, let's say, we need a cool compiler which is fast and so on. And this is something how some guys found together GCC, which is important for the automotive industry. But it's not like a company open source that someone came and said, I have this business strategy, we have to pursue this, and now we use open source as a tool to enable it. But it's just like, guys, like, it's fun to work with you guys. I believe in the technology. I want to push it and I want to make it available for everyone. And I also want to invite the world to contribute to this awesome project. And this is the one half. And the other half is, let's say, invite everyone to contribute to a project is not the primary goal here. It's more like using it as a tool. And if you have contributors, fine. Or sometimes you do not even have processes to deal with them. It's like a closed, let's say, group drive a project openly.
Yeah. Okay, but what does free mean in this context? I think this is a misunderstood thing. Free, how is it meant?
Okay, this is something which is completely misunderstood. This free is free. It's like free of charge. Everyone can use it. This is, in the first sense, I think mostly right, but it comes still at a cost because you need people to maintain it, to drive it, to help others to use it, for instance, to write manuals, all this thing. And this is labor, and this costs you something. And if this lacks this labor, for instance, if you have a bug discovered and you have a project with a serious deadline, and your project and your deadline, let's say that you can hold it, depends on it, then it suddenly becomes no longer free, and you have to invest time or money to solve this thing. And this is something you have then. These are the two perspectives. On the one hand, it's free because everyone can use it. On the other hand, it has to be maintained, has to promote it. You need people who help you, let's say, using it, and this is non-free in the sense of labor costs, for instance, somehow.
I really like the statement which I once heard. There's sometimes people saying it's like free, like in free beer, but another one said more, and I think that's a better one to say. If you use it in the professional environment, it's free like a free puppy. So you get the puppy in the beginning, right? And it's growing your project, and after a time you have a dog, and you have still the responsibility for all the things. You need to feed it, and you need to make sure that it survives because you rely on certain things. You're getting used to it. And even if you change locations, you often take your puppy with you, right? You don't leave it at the place where you are. And this is a lot of things which is the free part for me. So whenever I ask, like, what is free open source software, I first always think about free, like free puppy.
Okay. Yeah,
okay.
That's a very good analogy. That's a very good analogy because there are many things that come. So if you, what would be the contrary of free and open source software? That would be a paid closed software, right? So that you go to a provider, you pay for the software, and you get it up and running in your environment. Of course, there's going to be some integration or some things that might be necessary, some professional services, customization. But then you are probably signing a document where company you're buying the software from is going to be liable for that software, right? And they are going to maintain that software until the contract is valid and so on. If we go back, if we read the licenses from open source, the most permissive ones, Apache maybe, you're going to see that there is no liability for what is being written there, right? So use it as it is. And that can be a problem, or could be a solution depending on how you see that. And I like the analogy about the puppy. I will carry that on.
Yeah, it's really great because it also fits like if you say you don't want to have the free puppy, you can go to a petting zoo. It costs you something. It's not as much as if you get the puppy and have to buy food and so on. And it's similar with open source. So many think it's free labor, but in the end, quite often it's even more expensive than just going to a proprietary company and say, I want this feature, because it's open source. Once the feature is implemented, it's there. The developers cannot monetize it any further. That means if some customer wants a new feature from an open source project, they have to pay it upfront, which then leads to a situation it might be more expensive. And the big issue is that quite often the open source work needs to be paid by the budgetable projects, but that's completely contrary to how open source works, because it can be used by the whole company. Therefore, companies should actually just create some budget for strategic decisions, and then it should be paid by this, because it can really be used by the whole company, and in the long term it will be cheaper. But in just now, in the immediate term for the project, people say, "Oh, it's so expensive, you cannot afford it," and so on. And this is something that needs to be changed in the minds of the decision makers at the bigger companies.
I mean, open source is quite new in automotive. I know from other sectors, open source is used for many years, but in automotive, it's quite new. I mean, this mentality is very new, because software in automotive was before very proprietary, with proprietary tooling and everything, and everybody is writing the code and keeping it and not sharing with others. I think this mentality is new of free and open source in automotive, and I think this brings also a lot of challenges. Because in automotive you have safety relevant parts and non-safety relevant parts, and you have to deal with this mixed criticality actually. And in this software-defined vehicle space, I think this will be more important in future, because this topic becomes more attention. And how do you see actually this mentality change in the automotive? I mean, adapting more and more free and open source software.
Yeah, the thing is, when we work with customers, for instance, it's like two different views. On the developer side, for instance, we have a lot of support, and really, let's say it's also from a human perspective, it's really a pleasure to work with these developers together, and how they also motivate you as an open source company and help you here. And then you have the management level, where we have still some catching up to do, where we face sometimes, let's say, questions like, we want feature X, okay, and then we say, okay, feature X will go into open source, and then suddenly the eyebrow rises, and then, yeah, but then my competitor also has the same feature. That, yes, yeah, of course, yeah, and then, oh my God, I do not want to pay that my competitor has a feature for free. And then you get, for instance, a question if you can do this feature exclusively, which is when you maintain an open source project, it can become a dev if you have certain features which you can no longer share with no one. And this is something where the mentality, in my opinion, is then, not for all of them, but for some of them, to say, I do not want to succeed, I want my competitor to fail. And then to just say, no, don't care. It's something, I pay these guys this feature. All the other remaining stuff, it comes more or less not for free, but I can get this also as well. And yes, my competitor can have it too. But in the end, also when you think it further, if you are on a car manufacturer, you will not write all your software on your own. You have other companies supporting you in the software development process. If you have a proprietary software, and you have, let's say, pay licenses, also all your suppliers have to pay this license to develop the feature Therefore, the cost of development raises exponentially if you have a lot of suppliers there, or maybe not exponentially, but they will rise. But if you have invested it once in open source, your competitor has it, but also all your tier 1s and tier 2 and tier 3s will have it, and they do not have to pay for it again, but they can use it, implement a feature it requires an OEM, and it makes life so much easier in the end, if you think it like this.
So I would ask actually a question to Philip, because Philip said that he brought in 2010, 2011 the Linux to the cars, right? Because that goes in the direction to what you were saying before, Patty, open source being new in automotive. And that I think this mindset of collaboration in the open source, in the automotive for open source, that might be new. But open source is being used, right, Philip, for quite a long time, right?
Yeah, this is
no. I meant actually the mindset. Not the project itself.
Yeah.
The mindset more. Yeah.
So what we could see just on this from the past, in 2011-12, our intention was not to go open source. Our intention was to create a price and cost fitting product in the market. And we thought that we get more computation performance at this time, and we could get a lot of features. We want to be more flexible and scalable. So we started to consume open source software. And we actually first built mixed products where we had proprietary RTOS involved with a Linux system before we later on changed to a pure Linux device. But what I liked about this part was that, yes, we consumed a lot of open source, and we didn't do all on our own. We had a supplier. And the supplier was providing us with the kernel, updating of patches, helped us with the tooling because we were completely new to this. And we continued this partnership for 10 plus years. The nice thing about it is that due to the fact that it was a Linux kernel, we had actually the chance also to ramp on new suppliers who helped us in further generation when we saw we have capacity gaps in the company and we could transfer it to another company. We could get better price parts. And as we sometimes didn't want to directly do the patching, we actually contracted all of these people to do the upstream patches for us. And this is the past world. And what we see now is that also with Eclipse SDV, that companies start contributing into the open source ecosystem, bringing in projects. And that's something which also companies have done in the past, like in the IoT space. You've seen also Bosch being active, pushing in projects in there. But it's quite, even if you do it in a foundation environment, the collaborative part is missing. And that's just what changes now, that also automotive companies start creating their OSPOs. They start thinking about open source strategically, not as a pure consumption. They start investing for risk reduction, to have a path for maintenance, to see that I can change suppliers later on.
And there is one question to you, Philip, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, your free puppy analogy seems to be very nice for our audience. The question is actually, what do you think would be the right way for Eclipse Core and AutoStart to join forces?
The easiest way is that we see the member companies, those which are investing in S-Core, which are members also Eclipse SDV in the wider ecosystem, and you see AutoStart partners, and to have this exchange and to see like what could be used, where does an S-Core benefit from what has been achieved in AutoSAR, mainly the adaptive space, right? We're with the Eclipse S-Core talking the microprocessor space, not the microcontroller space, so not touching the classic one, touching more the adaptive, and see like what elements are there, what has been done. The complicated part maybe in like how things are tied together. It's not really a modular that you just download a library and the library is split and you can build a library on your own. You get the dependencies like you may know from a Linux system. So AutoSAR comes with a lot of tools and so on. Then it may get into certain copyright issues, patent issues, but to just say like, hey, where do our processes overlap? Where can we create something? And yeah, this may in a first shot contradict with how you experience traditional or full open source and development, right? So it has an automotive touch, and I do not expect that suddenly hundreds of people will jump to the Eclipse S-Core just for the fun of writing a SUM IP stack or something like this. So, and yeah, it's not the very good answer to the question, like what be the right way to join forces, but there are a lot of initiatives around there. There are other items like the VDA or so, and there's room where these groups can exchange and where major player also exchange. So,
but AutoSAR is still very closed, right? I mean,
it's closed. It pays,
Yeah.
so you need to. They hold a lot of so they have the copyright on the sources, so it's not easy to just open it and bring it into Eclipse just from the pure license perspective, based on how the AutoSAR contracts are in. But if we are open, if people want to use AutoSAR, there are a few components which are could be broadly used in other industries. But the focus was originally the automotive industry. It's like if you want to use and go into the automotive space, I don't like to say it fully, but maybe the easiest way to just pay your 20K or whatever it costs, I don't know, pay the entry fee and get rid of all potential concerns about copyright and IP to just go into and join the AutoSAR part, and then you're part of the club just for having the right to play.
Yeah, so I'm quite skeptical on the AutoSAR becoming open source in any sense, even only the adaptive part. Just because it's a legal problem. It's not it's not a technical problem. It's a legal problem. It involves big players, and everyone needs to want, and the lawyer needs to find a way. It's like it doesn't seem to me to be trivial. I'm not a lawyer, but that's what I understood from all the talks that I have heard, all the conversations. Once upon a time, we had an internal project in the previous company that I worked at eventually with Christian and Matthias. And to make that project open source, there was a lot of bureaucracy, and it was a single company. But even signing, everyone needs to sign, even people that just once in time in life has made a small commit need to sign to get the code open source because of the history, whatever it means. I can imagine how complex that is when you need to put the big OEM players and AutoSAR all together, not talking about the vendors, like those that are selling the AutoSAR stack and AutoSAR toolchain. It's quite challenging, I would say, to bring things together. Otherwise, it would already be there, because I think the intention from AutoSAR Consortium and SDV to join forces, that was there, I guess, a few years ago already, right?
You could also swap it around, right? You could say like whatever is generated in S-Core is created as open source, and it could become compatible with an adaptive part, and you come into a reference or example standard. You put the right word in front of it, implementation, right? Because then so far adaptive is more about the interfaces and to the operating system, to the higher level and the stack, how it's implemented. It's basically how you define it, and you can say, okay, I bring in components, I bring in parts, and that's not new to AutoSAR, right? There is in the AutoSAR space, there was also the genuinely diagnostic logs and trace parts being part of the example implementation, I think, something like this. Yeah, so it's not the best example, but it's an example where it went into the AutoSAR space, and this could be also something where S-Core parts get into the AutoSAR.
That is doable today, I would say. I don't see any issue on doing that. So.
Yeah.
I mean, in this whole open source, I mean, OEMs are companies that want to make profit out of products, and how this collaboration between OEMs and tier ones, for example, could happen in this OSS space, in this open source software space, how this could work. I mean, you need some kind of collaboration model. I mean, if you want to incorporate open source projects, you have tier ones, you have OEMs. This has to work together somehow. But yeah, how can this work?
This is perfect. I think this is also here. Chris H. Also here asked you, do you think Eclipse S-Core is heading in the right direction, project process and content-wise? This fits perfectly here. Be, for instance, applied, or let's say, worked together and involved in the Eclipse S-Core project, also presented the ISORIX2 as a zero-copy middleware. And here the idea is that we contributed all the source code, which we already have open source, but also safety artifacts and everything you require for certification. And we said, no, this is our business model. And here the question was, I'm a contributor to S-Core, to the open source project, but this open source project is then later on going to be in cars, and some people will make money out of it. How can I make money out of it in the end? What is the value for me, which is or the business case for me, for our little company, for instance, to contribute to this project? We are, let's say, working together with them, but until today, for me, in my personal opinion, there is no such business case in the end. Ideas are like we can provide engineering services around this in the end, but this is not something which is sustainable. And this is, I think, a key for Eclipse S-Core, a key problem which they have to solve soon to become successful. For me, an open source project means also that not only Bosch, Continental, BMW, and Mercedes, all these official partners are there, and also Corix and so on, and maybe Kibit is also involved in there, are part of this, but also smaller companies which have an expertise in a very specific single thing, like we have, and they have a business interest in doing this. And here the idea would be, for instance, that we have some kind of incentive that you say, okay, as someone provides, for instance, or it says a liability in the end, and makes money out of it, that you get a part of the, let's say, of the income that which the company makes, or some other kind of money incentive. But this is not yet there, and until it's not yet there, it's what I mentioned before. It's like a big company, open source. It's nice to have, let's say, collaboration, open collaboration between an OEM and tier ones and so on, but it excludes everyone else. So just very simplistic example, but it's a valid one. You are a student, you have a brilliant idea for an algorithm which really solves a problem, a very specific problem, but it solves a problem for them. Why should you contribute this? For the good of heart, you can do this for the good of heart, and then everyone makes money. I think it's unfair. It's in the end, you should get money out of it for your contribution for this. And this answer is not, this question is not answered. Yeah.
So,
but is it really?
Go ahead, Phil. Sorry.
But is it the one who solved the tricky challenge in the Linux kernel will not get money for it? Any contributor, I don't get money for all the hundreds of talks and I have with people talking with them about open source and safety. I do it because I like what I do, or I do things because I solve a problem. And it solves a problem. I think it was Greg Crow-Hartman who said that a lot of the open source contributors are in the kernel are also very egoistic because they just solved the problem and they brought this then in, and it's good that many others have the same problem and they just use the problem. But I know a bunch of people that contribute to open source and don't think about the reinvest or return of invest in form of money. And I wonder if the student which has this super nice algorithm first thinks about I provided somewhere, or thinks about I won't put it to the extreme. I make it an intellectual property, put a patent on it, and then I will make a whole lot of money with it. I mean, this will not happen. So I get your point, but that's what I meant also in the original part, in the beginning. I don't see the hundreds of people coming running to S-Core. Why should they?
Yeah. So you're right. In open source, quite a lot are not doing it for the money. The issue is that quite a lot are doing it in their spare time. And then this XKCD comic, this lone developer from Nebraska, where the whole internet is depending on, who is almost on a burnout. And that's the issue. So quite a lot have the luxury to be employed by a company who sponsor their open source work. So that's a really nice thing, but quite a lot of developers also don't have that, and they do their work in their spare time. And that at some point, the project is just that, because they also have some private life, a day job, and so on, which does not allow to continue on something. And in order to make the open source community and the maintainer more robust towards these scenarios, something needs to be changed. So it's not only automotive, it's a general problem. And also for SDV, I was last week on the Tastes the Future meetup in Berlin, and there was a presentation about can Germany win the SDV game? And it was like there are two options: either the old tier ones like Bosch, Continental, and so on become better at software, or startups will take their place and they will succeed with SDV. And the issue with S-Core, from my point of view, is that it has a structural fault. They also they only thought about the tier ones with the model they thought of how to monetize the contributions to S-Core. It's only switched to this old tier ones, which have a ton of support people where they can say, okay, we contribute something now, maybe for nothing, but then in 1 or 2 years, there's a project, there's an SOP, and then we have our hundreds of people who can support them. If you have a startup, then it needs to be done differently. So startups need to pay their people now and not in 2 or 3 years. And that's something I think they miss a big opportunity to not also include this other part on how to win the SDV game.
I would take it one step further, and that's nice. And I strongly state that this is my individual opinion here. I mean, I cannot say it often enough, but I will say it here again. I see a fundamental mismatch in having all these OEMs, tiers, large companies. There are others who have done things already. But there's a large set of companies which start open source initiatives. And I will not blame them for it because they pay my money, and I'm happy that I have this position. Still, we are willing to pay a supplier for a proprietary solution developed explicitly for us a whole lot of money, and we put it next to, here comes something for free, so I'm not even willing to pay a supplier for maintaining my software. And I'm surprised that I don't get any thing. And if you're talking about the Nebraska guy, that's where we should just consume and then see the risk and bring the things back, rather than that we start all these fancy projects, throw in a whole lot of software, which actually steals money then from the people and steals potential contributors, because the contributor to a very narrow use case area will not contribute somewhere else. And large point, then I stop. If I think about a large scale or normal automotive project, and if you think about what effort you may have, you do a cost calculation. Let's say you have a 5% accurate cost estimation at the beginning, which you will most likely not have. And you have 100 people in. You could just throw out 5 people of the 100, let them do open source work alone, nothing else than open source work. And you will not even see it at the end of the project calculation. I know it's like risk and chances and so on, so it will be balancing. Nevertheless, what I want to say is there are enough potentials to just say, here are people who are thought to work in the open, doing open source work, or we just take 2% of our budgets. This goes into this strategic invest budget, which you were mentioning, Matthias, I guess. Like, just say, that's where we invest. And we have seen that, like, for example, Mercedes-Benz Tech Innovation did this with the GitHub funding, and others pay also people for doing upstreaming, or Bosch brought a lot of drivers from NXP and TI upstream via other companies because they said, okay, we want this, and we did the invest, so let's bring this upstream into the kernel to give back to the community and reduce our maintenance burden, right? It's not like charity. It's risk reduction, maintenance, capabilities, and these kind of things, and not starting the project.
Yeah. So if I step back and look what are the reasons for moving into open source, I think about the locking, the chances that you get something you're paying proprietary, I mean, and you're locked in. Now the open source is the idea is to do what you mentioned, Philip. You had the Linux kernel in the past, and you could change the company just assessing who can maintain the kernel for you, who can do the things, then you can change. So this is for me the biggest reason to because if you see the AutoSAR was also created by a consortium of OEMs, the big German OEMs. They created AutoSAR together with other companies, of course. but then at the end of the day, they created something and they need to pay the license for that product. And if you go from one supplier to another, you probably had so there's always a bit of salt on top of the stack that's proprietary, right? And then you need to switch that, and there's a lot of things that needs to be done. So the idea, if we can come to a level where the open source is there and is used, like you said, the Linux kernel, then I think that's where is potential for startups, Christian and Matthias, because you are going to, if you are contributing to something, eventually you could be assessed in a dedicated project based on your contributions, and based on your technical capacity, you're going to say, yeah, I can be liable for this, I can deliver, and I can customize, and based on this commits that I did here, you can see that my company is good enough to do the job. So this is one thing that I think is not going out from doing open source. So the liability and some kind of customization, that is going to be. I don't see a big company taking something from the open source and just accepting the liability for that. They are going to have a team that will accept that. Okay, that can be a thing, but you need them to have a big team to maintain that. So I don't think that's coming. Sometimes it's easier than to have another company liable. So liability is one thing. Of course, safety, we talked about maybe previously, not today, but safety case, safety certification of this could be also something at the end. Yeah, those are the elements, those are the chances. And reduce the time to the market. Reduce time to market. If you can reduce time to market with your qualification, then I think that's where opportunities are for other companies. Sometimes a big company is too slow.
I have one question actually. I mean, all these industry initiatives like Sophie, Eclipse, SDV, AGL, I mean, how they play a role here in this whole SDV open source discussion? I mean, these are big initiatives. They are, I mean, the supporting organizations, but what is the key, what is their role actually? I mean, how they act in this ecosystem? I mean,
the first thing, it's not completely an answer to your question, but the first thing I came to mind, you forgot ROS 2. Yeah, okay, it's not, let's say, an automotive, let's say, started framework, but in the end, it does similar things like AutoSAR. It has tools around this, so similar problems. It's not certified out of the box. And here also, sorry for deviating now from your question, but also Philip, what you said, that SCORE will not have a ton of users. I think it's actually with SCORE, we should aim for this. It would be cool that a student says, I have here this little robot and I want to use SCORE to implement a robot to try and win a robo race, for instance. Because if you make it a little bit more attractive for them, that they use it and teach it in universities, you as a company get experts directly from university which already know your framework. And this is something which is a strong argument for ROS 2, for instance. You have already all the drivers out there, students use it to realize projects, and when you hire them for a ROS 2 project, you hire already more or less an expert. And this is something
right.
which I wish, let's say, for instance, with all the open source initiatives that we start, is do not focus on the big companies, really focus also that. Also, last year on the Eclipse Open Community Experience, I also watched a panel discussion. There was a discussion point: how can we make AutoSAR sexy? How can we make students use AutoSAR? It's depending on what you think of AutoSAR, but one big thing is if you are a student and create an AutoSAR project and open source it, you will be sued because you use the proprietary API. And this is something which should be an important point when we go for open source project, also for the SDV context, also when it's just intended for SDV, but we want that the people love to work with this. Yeah. These are my 2 cents.
Okay. Yeah, in open source, I mean, a vehicle is actually a safety relevant device. I mean, if we use open source, we have also always connected cars as SDVs, always connected. Also cybersecurity, I mean, how this should be tackled actually in this open source environment, safety, security. And this is also one of the questions I think I've seen here in the
from Andrew.
Also here, safety and cybersecurity. I mean, how to deal with these two topics, safety and cybersecurity.
It's nice to see that safety and cybersecurity, because we can go 10 to 15 years back, and security and open source was a completely different thing. And you see nowadays that as long as you have your keys, the private keys at hand, right, you no longer do security by obscurity. That's just the minor element. So these times have passed. And it took a long time to get this through the mind of the people. And you will still find people out there who believe if I kept things closed, then it's more secure, just for having it closed. And it's not as easy as that for safety, because there are also far more things to consider. Just the very small subset of it. If you think about a container, and if you have your container under control and it's isolated, you get a good feeling for security. But it does not necessarily mean that you have considered things for safety as well. Imagine this little container. I'm making up an example. It's maybe not the best realistic one, but sure, this container holds a GPU, and you start your 3D game, playing whatever favorite game. It heats up the CPU, the GPU, because you have high computation performance, and you have then dynamic voltage frequency scaling. Said, oh, am I heating power? So I'm reducing the frequency, and suddenly your whole scheduling getting impacted, right? So you have no longer freedom from interference for a safety perspective, while from a security side, everything is still nice and smoothly running. So you have a much wider system perspective. So you need to look into a much wider scope when you create this. And so creating a safe system is as hard or harder than having a secure system. And if you see the state of where open source software is for security today and where it is for safety today as open source, but you have to take a much longer path, so you can much more easily come to a secure solution than you can come to the safe solution. Just like if you take similar complexity use case.
And you didn't talk about process yet, right? So process.
No, not at all. I mean, this is, I always try to get around the process parts. Processes are often following standards. Standards are made by companies. Standards are not made by, oh, let's look what are best practices from an open source community and how they do it. That's something which you currently try to achieve, and where also like the trustable software framework try to get in, right? To say like, what are best practices? How can I trust into whatever is created? Is it a single vendor open source? Is it a little guy in Nebraska? Is it possible to reproduce things? What is the dependencies? And so on. There's a lot of assets, like 450 points they take into the trustable considerations. And you need to judge then for you, do you trust the things? And this can be actually mapped to IEC 61508 to take a wider industry standard than the ISO 26262. And you can try to get your argument. And the other thing is that also no standard really tells you that you have to follow the V model or V thing. It shows you the relations of artifacts, but it doesn't say like you go once from the top down and then you go from down up again. Nobody's telling that you have to do this. You should give an argument why you do so, and that you fulfilled all the best practices which are there.
Just I wanted to give a little example how we tackle this, for instance, with our library. And I would claim that we are converging to a really safe and secure solution. First of all, if you want to really have safety, you have to know that you are on a container. If you want to create safety and you are just a GPU one and just creating your own chip, you cannot do this. You have no idea where it is used. So therefore, you need the context too. So therefore, since we do not have the context because anyone can use us, we have to do it a little bit differently. Let's say provide guarantees and say, if this happens, we can guarantee you this, and this is provided by this test case, by this design document, by these requirements, and so on. And therefore, you can build then your safety case on top of this in context in the end, and write your own tests and process and so on. And also this process discussion we had because we started at Bosch, open source Eclipse ISRIX, the classic version, also at Bosch, and then also the question was in the beginning, how can open source be safe if they do not follow the process, the Bosch internal process here. But a counterexample is the GCC also does not follow the process, but it was certified by QNIC. So therefore, how did they do this? So therefore,
it's tool qualification and not a certification regarding the software. It's another process.
Okay, then it maybe was a bad example, but I think Linux and now certified, I think Linux, ESLB, they claimed at least this in LinkedIn, and also Linux is not has not a safety process, and yeah, it has a big mailing list how they, let's say, organize things, but still, so therefore you do not need this process, but you already mentioned this. So therefore, here you have to, if you take a look at open source and also, let's say, consider safety in open source, you have to think a little bit outside of the box, but in the end, it's solvable and not so. There are harder problems out there. This is really solvable, and I think that companies already did solve this in the past.
But you should not you should not see like there is no relevance for it. Like if you see the standards, which comes from best practices, they provide you with a lot of work products, artifacts which you should create, and there is a certain scent in there, and you need to understand what they're meant to be for, and it's like to also try to figure and catch the people from the side. And I make this example like when you have for C coding, you have a MISRA rule, and the MISRA rule says don't use goto, or you must not use goto, so it will give you finding. So you can never apply MISRA to the Linux kernel directly because it's C code, and then you would remove the goto. The people who have written this would tell you why they have a goto and where goto makes sense. But if you make the MISRA rule and say you must not use goto unless you know what you're doing, everybody will say, oh, I know what I'm doing. Right? And this is sometimes a mismatch there, and we see this. So the standards help you, but if you have like a rescue ring for the water and you missed the requirement that it should float, you can read a safety certification most likely, because you always picked up people from the ground, or I don't know. Right? You can make it will not be like this part, but you may miss an element, and how easily you can miss an element. Just to let you know, a lot of devices are based on ARM, right? We have ARM chipsets. ARM comes with the trusted firmware, which is a nice thing. It helps you in security, right? We were talking about security. The ARM trusted firmware has the possibility to stop the CPU in case of there is any kind of concern, or a trust application can just say, okay, here is a security breach. We don't want to reach it further, so we stop the further execution and we stop the whole system here and get into like in a secure state. You need to include this in your safety argumentation and maybe check the safety manuals if you have one at hand, where it says like, when you have the if you use ARM trusted firmware for my safety element out of context, please make sure that you are not triggering the CPU because I have a safe ASLD scheduling and everything, which relies on that you don't use it. And this is like just the level of way you have to think, and you will get a certification because the certification authority will not know this detail. That's you who need to know it, and the certification authority will help you, and they use the standard to find an argument. And that's how you can get other people in. I want to touch on one point, Fatih, which you brought in, because we haven't really covered the SOFI, AGL, and other part. And it also goes to the beginning, what you said, because you said it's open source is new for the automotive industry. And we had the analogy with the poppy. I will also bring one with soccer. You will not enter Champions League directly. There's many, many leagues which you have to go. And Eclipse SDV, SOFI, ELISA, AGL, you name it, right? I missed so many now, but just named a few. You suddenly get access to experts who have done open source for many years, and you're playing more in your regional local league first, still being exposed to other people. So for example, if you are in the ELISA space from an automotive company, we were directly talking to the Yocto maintainer, we're talking to the Xen maintainer, we're talking to the Zephyr people, and it's not even our project part. So we interact, we communicate, and we can reach out to them. And this is a benefit where you can learn. And I think here we need to be patient and just say, like, the people need to learn. They don't start in Champions League. and we still need to give them a bit of time, and they make their trials. And if you see the young kids playing, they're playing soccer, they make goals, but they all run at all and then run back, and there is no tactics, no strategy in there. And that's where we are currently in the process. We start to getting first strategy, tactics, and hopefully make the learnings fast enough that we don't die for all the startups as the big players like we have. As a company.
I mean, as I told at the beginning, I mean, there are this new player in this SDV area, actually. I mean, with Li Auto, for example, making open source Halo OS, or Google with Android Automotive OS. And these are new players in this area. I mean, for example, if we take Android Automotive OS, I mean, I read a lot of articles about that, and now people are very interested in including this in their systems, in the vehicle, and so on. It looks to me a little bit another vendor lock-in, actually. I don't know how you see this, but because the main provider of Android Automotive is Google, and I don't know how the
single vendor open source is a new proprietary.
I mean, I have some concerns about that.
Provocative statement here.
Yeah, I mean, I have real concerns about that, because everybody is now trying to take it, but at the end, yeah, I mean, it's again proper strategy, so to say, and how to deal with that. I mean, if, for example, Google decides tomorrow, they will probably not do that, but to stop the project, they say Google is doing this project. They start the project. After a while, they say, okay, it's over. We don't care anymore about that. Who will care about that then? I mean, I think this is a huge problem. How to deal with such problems, which are not coming from a community, but from a big company, big IT company.
And also others have seen this. I mean, you don't, if you see there's Android's Automotive OS, which you just take now, but we had Android, and now we have Harmony OS, which is like, it is the result of not being able to access this single vendor open source anymore. Huawei was not able to do this anymore, so they need to come up there. And if you go in the other way, you don't need to take this. You can also use as a Terraform, which now is OpenTofu, because there was lots of people already consuming, and there was actually an active community of users. But this only works if there is enough ecosystem and people driving it forward and taking it, right? And it's not. That's the other thing. It's not that they simply are bad people and want to make money with it. You can consider if you want to blame HashiCorp or not. But also with Elastic, it's like they were this super hyperscaler, and we were consuming a lot of open source and not investing in it. And there was then the thought like, okay, the only thing how I can get out of this is to charge people, change my license, and try to survive. Otherwise, I will die, because I haven't found the business and was not prepared in this scale. If there's a large community, they will pick up again, right? Then you have lost anyway. But
but we have this. I mean, I see this with Ubuntu. I mean, with Canonical, they bring. They want to enter also automotive. They provide products. Also, Red Hat is doing it. I mean, many IT companies now. I don't know. Try to enter this field under the free and open source somehow, but it's not really free and open source what they do. And this is some kind of a big risk, in my opinion, for automakers. I mean, I don't know how to deal with this risk, but I think it should be properly thought about. I think this is not an easy thing, in my opinion. I mean, also Andrew wrote in the comments the Red Hat example. I think, this is probably a great product, but at the end, what do you do if Red Hat now, decides to change things? How to deal with that?
I mean, the first thing which you have here is Red Hat is the most prominent one for safety argument on the Linux kernel. The first thing is now you have the Red Hat one, and standard is Unix, I would say, right, which is also a proprietary solution, but you can build on it, right? You have fundamentally a solid core. You can then say which amount of risk I'm willing to take. Do I move over to a bet on Zephyr, a bet on ThreadX? One difference which we have a lot of switching effort, and let's say if you have a Red Hat part, you can build on AutoSD. So there's the AutoSD core. This will be just like cheating because we know how things evolved from CentOS to CentOS RHEL, how Alma Linux is facing struggling around this. Still, we not only have Red Hat, we have CodeThink who is offering support in this field. We have Electrobit with their Corbus
Yes.
solution. So it's
ED
search.
Corbus. Yeah.
So now I have so I will make an RFQ. And the RFQ for my new stack application layer, whatever I want to create, is that I send the RFQ to BlackBerry. I send it to not directly Canonical, but Canonical is underneath the Electrobit one, so I send it to Electrobit. I send it to CodeThink. I send it to Bosch, to Wind River, to Linutronics, because they all have capabilities and shown this in the past that they created safe system designs which involve Linux and hosting workloads. And I can have an RFQ for 7. And we were quite locked into a solution in Linux in the past. But we could change in the new generation. We said, okay, now we go this step. And we had to invest on this. And we had to pay more money than it should be because we were locked into certain tooling parts. But the higher stack, the layer, the ecosystem, all the developers are familiar with it. And I can go to the university. This was the argument. I can go to the university and I can find a person who is having fun with Linux since studies and can go into the kernel and tell me something about the kernel. And I guess also QNX, BlackBerry. So BlackBerry has understood with QNX. They bring up the community edition and bring this into universities. And it's also going into the argument what Matthias and Christian say, where they say, build an OS core project in a way that you approach students. That's a similar thing, like making it attractive, getting it in there. And this is something which is very hard, for example, as we had for AutoSAR. There it's almost impossible to being not sued at the end. I mean, it's someone also who wants to sue you as a student, wants to keep it. They could just say, okay, we ignore this and we make a agreement that nobody will sue you out of this who's member of AutoSAR. It would be an option, but that's it. But we shouldn't underestimate. I mean, there's also a reason there, and it's not that you do an instant swap into all open source. It's a journey we have to go.
And what do you think where it will go? I mean, I think now all OEMs try to establish SDV, on the vehicle side, also as a business model and so on, including, free and open source. And all this stuff is so complex, actually, it's establishing everything. I don't know. I don't see any, not so easily the future where it will go, actually. Everybody is trying to do something, but I don't know. I mean, for example, the Asian brands, they are very fast in, establishing this market, developing products. But the European OEMs, for example, struggle a lot. And I don't know what the difference is, but yeah, there seems to be some mindset difference, or I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where it will go, actually.
There's also...
Okay. I think it's maybe not how it will go, but I hope it will go. It's more like a vision. It goes so in the direction like we have let's say a stack for mission critical systems, for instance, and then we become broader, more companies and more industries collaborate, and then they will realize in the future that, hey, if I'm manufacturing a car or a train, I have to solve the same problems. Here, a score, for instance, or whatever kind of stack has already solved the typical problem. So therefore, we just use it. But hey, by the way, we have, when you're on avionics, for instance, you are more into formal verification, you have sometimes even harder standards. But when you say, okay, this already solves 50% of my problems, maybe I contribute this, also, let's say, my solutions to this. And this could be a wonderful, happy place in the end. This is, let's say, I hope that it converges to that you have all these autonomous machines from, let's say, flying to on rails, cars, delivery robots, and so on. We have there an ecosystem where you have also to drive innovation there. What we realize is, for instance, that the medical industry is actually quite advanced when it comes to testing, for instance. This is something which I found when I came from automotive industry that we lag a little behind here. And this is something when we are open source and then realize we can collaborate here, that it really can drive innovation. And this is, I wish that it happens.
Mm. I mean, with this wish, I mean, we are already over the time. I have so many questions actually I want to ask, but I could not ask. I think we need a second episode in June. I mean, we should definitely continue this because I could not ask everything. But thank you for this very interesting conversation with you guys. Thanks for the audience for the questions. I think we have to look for a second episode, hopefully soon. Yeah, thank you so much, and see you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much.